dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio. I remain your host, Mark Angelides. We're continuing our conversation with Liberty Nation's enterprise reporter, Joe Schaeffer. Thanks for sticking around, Joe. At the end of the last segment, we got to talking about what Barack Obama had recently said regarding you're entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to have what you perceive as facts amplified in the wider world through the media. And this kind of brings me to what is possibly, for me, it's the most grating topic in modern politics. And of course, it's not just modern politics. It's been going on for a very long time. We've all read about yellow journalism and the history of that. But the idea that facts shouldn't be the prime focal point of what the media is reporting, and it should be seen through lenses. I mean, this troubles me deeply, and I'm sure it troubles Johnny Cash, who wrote a whole song about something similar.
Well, yeah, and there's two things that go together here. The one is, they want to maintain their power. There are two ways to do it: suppress your enemy, but also control the narrative. Controlling the narrative is the key thing, and the biggest thing, I've written about this many times. The most cherished thing to them is to keep their hold on what I call a captive audience. And that what that means is their opinions aren't very popular, especially with their racial divisiveness. Your average white accountant working in Indiana really doesn't want to have to go to a DEI mandatory training session.
Sure.
When he's at work and be told how bad white people are. So they know it's unpopular. So what do? They make him do that as part of his job. That's called the captive audience. You want to watch a football game? You just want to watch sports on TV? No, you're there for that, but they're going to put in the propaganda, the end racism in the end zones and blah, 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 everything we know. So they love their captive audiences. And that's how they get to define what the facts are. That's what you see in their dominance of the school system and why they're against school choice. They want to keep their stranglehold on America's youth so they can propagandize them. It goes all the way from cradle to grave. They want to control narratives. And it's so funny. They used to say about Hollywood, oh, if you think Hollywood's too liberal, go form your own film companies. But, you look at them today, they think X is right-wing, which is kind of a joke in my opinion, but they think it's this right-wing social media platform. So what did they do? They went and started Blue Sky. It's a ghost town. It's like nobody cares about Blue Sky. So that's not good enough for this. So they tried to take their advice. We're going to start our own thing. Nobody cares about it. So what they're back to saying, we gotta suppress X. We gotta, make sure these facts don't get amplified on this social media platform because that's dangerous. So they can't, it's not hypocrisy. That's why I stress over and over again. It's not hypocrisy. It's maintaining power. It's like I get to do things you don't get to do. Not hypocrisy. This is how I stay in power, and power is everything to this progressive ruling establishment.
So yes, they well, here's the thing: they define everything through the lens of power. That's this whole this whole thing about the patriarchy, right? That they see that as the defining element of the patriarchy is power over somebody else. And that's just not true. That's not how relationships actually work in the real world, right? Because imagine if, let's say you're a husband, father, and the way that you lead your life is by exerting your power and your influence over your wife or over your children. How is that going to work out for you? I can tell you it would not work out that well for most married men. It's a myth. It's a myth. And of course, you have people who run companies, men who run companies. If they try and exert a dominance, if they try and do a dominance situation over their employees, well, their employees are going to go somewhere else pretty darn quick. And so this whole idea that relationships are based on dominance it's such a false idea, and it's such an easily disproven idea, because you have friends, right? Are those relationships based on on power dynamics? Are they based on dominance of one over the other? Of course not. You fall in love with somebody. Is it based on your dominance over them or their dominance over you? For some people, perhaps. But for the vast majority, that's not just the reality. So the people who say these kind of things, that they say everything is about a dominance, just imagine what their lives must be like if all their relationships are governed by this idea of dominance within a power structure. It's tragic. And as you point out, they're trying to convince everybody, cradle to grave, all the school systems, the work environments where that people are forced to go on mandatory racial awareness training, mandatory sexual behavior trainings. They're trying to enforce that this is what reality is, and it's just not the case. That's not the world. And in many ways, I feel sorry for the people who feel that that is the world that they live in, because it's a prison of their own making, and the only way to get out of it is to realize that that's your opinion, that's not a fact, which brings us nicely full circle.
It's also very dangerous for the rest of us, because there is two words to describe this, and it's the only two words that describe this: cultural Marxism.
Yeah.
For the committed social revolutionary, nothing is outside of destroying the established system. Everything, every single aspect of your life must be deployed in overthrowing the current system. And so that ends in a shot to the back of the neck. We learned that in the Soviet Union. If you are deemed to be upholding the system in your relationship, in the way you run your family, in the way you run your company, you will get shot in the back of the neck. That is the end result of everything you described.
I always tell people this. It always, when do you know that it's gone wrong? When they start digging the mass graves, which is, it always happens. But just to close up on that point, you say that everything has to bow to that system. There was somebody else who had that idea, and it kind of flies in the face of people saying this is left, this is right. But that was Mussolini, who said nothing outside the system, everything within the system. What did he call that again, Joe? Please remind me. Fascism. Fascism is what that was.
I consider communism to be the greatest evil of all time. Communism to me is a far bigger threat than something that was eliminated 100 years ago. They were brutally eliminated in a world war, wiped off the face of the earth. Adolf Hitler isn't around anymore. Benito Mussolini isn't around anymore. But the communists have never gone away. They have not gone away. The Russian Revolution, the Soviet Union was toppled, but the thought process that led to the Soviet Union is still very much with us. And I think it was transferred to the West more than anything. So culturally, you see it more in the West today than you do in the former Soviet Union, which is kind of amazing, which is why Eastern Europe is actually doing more to defend basic freedoms in Europe than Western Europe. But in the Cold War, it was the exact opposite.
They know where it went. Joe Schaeffer, thanks ever so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that is all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I've been your host, Mark Angelides. I'd like to thank our guests today, Mr. James Fight and Joe Schaeffer. And of course, thank you, the audience, for taking the time each week to tune in and join us here. Please do remember, Liberty Nation does not endorse campaigns, candidates, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. Thanks for being here.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.